essence of the discussion in the last class was how to tell a story effectively in simple words, how to make your audience being very hooked. And to do that, we actually visited the great minds and we did an analysis of some speeches. I showed you the transcript of certain speeches, and I'm just giving you a caution here. These classes will be highly effective if you actually go and by the end of the class watch those talks where the message will be further reinforced. So that is the purpose. So the essence of the last class, if I have to distill in a few sentences, it is about the powerful art of storytelling. Everybody can say stories. Everybody can start with a story. Everybody can narrate. But why do some personal narrations appeal to people? And why does certain narrations not so appealing or so lousy? We share two strategies. For example, in storytelling, if you share a story that others know already, you start your presentation in a very lousy manner. So you should actually, as speakers, as public speakers, you should know the art of creating your own story, your own personal narration based on your life. So this is one of the powerful messages I did in my last class. A. And B, we were discussing about another strategy called as the power of conflict in storytelling. Whenever there is a conflict, and we discussed about the story of Titanic, where there are a lot of conflicts on the story of the Rose and Jack, whether they will ultimately join together or will they break up. Will the society allow them to join? Will they live or die? Will the ship sink or will it not sink? So there are a lot. These are called as conflicts. So when you say your stories, it should have a lot of conflicts. So we discussed about these things. So I'm slightly touching upon those aspects to kind of really warm up today to focus on some new strategies. Okay, so I'm just really warming up to focus on some really new strategies. So as usual, we are not just going to bite more than what we can chew. Like, we are going to discuss about 3 strategies. And for those 3 strategies, I'm going to provide you a lot of videos where you just go and watch. But only one important aspect. Whatever we do and whatever we discuss, you are going to transmute it into action. You are going to transform it in your videos. So I'm sure that most of you would have done video recording before, but you are just trying to do a recording now at a little advanced level, just like an athlete who graduates from the zone international and provided you know the strategies, you have the skill, most of you have the skill set, most of you definitely have powerful narratives to share, but unfortunately most of us do not have very strong strategies. So as I deal this course with you, I also maybe can aspire to give a TED talk one day, though I did not nurture that thought so far, but probably I can also along with you plan to be a TED speaker one day, because anybody can be a TED speaker once you pass this audition. All right, so moving on, let me share my screen with you and move on to the remaining parts of or the remaining strategies which I haven't discussed. Shall we proceed?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm just presenting my screen now, and let me discuss the remaining strategies. Okay. 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 Now moving on to the next strategy is called as provide a lot of sensory details in your presentation. Now, what are sensory details? These are called as sensory details. Let me show you. These are sensory details. We have actually some bring visual impact to your audience. That is called the visual effect. And the second one is you can bring a great auditory impact in the way you choose your words. The third aspect relates to you can bring kinesthetic emotion in your audience where you kindle their emotions. Number four, you can bring this olfactory emotion wherein you can make them smell certain things, and gustatory emotion where you can actually make them taste. Now, this is called as the what do you call the sensory apparatus, and there is an acronym called VACOG, VAKOG, where your talk can appeal to both visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. And to give you an example of this, for example, if I were to share a story of my younger days, some 30 years back, I used to go and visit my granny at my village, and I used to travel in those steam engines, which really enthralled me as a small boy. And those steam engines, it is usually during the summer season or the winter season. I used to travel twice, and these beautiful landscapes, still I can just remember every landscape on my 8-hour journey, where there are hills, where there are waterfalls, where there are water bodies, where there are dams. I can just close my eyes and imagine those places, and I could still feel the vibration of those steam engines. And whenever I just travel to my village, my granny's house is very much close to the Kaveri river. So we used to just go and dip in the river, and I could just still feel the fresh smell of those grass fields. And when I enter into those beautiful waters, and how the water just caresses my feet, and most importantly, the food that I tasted, which my granny prepared, usually the non-veg stuff like the fish curry, so many times later, but that taste, but the food that she had prepared in me still lives in my senses. So I'm just giving you an example. Likewise, I can go on talking about certain stories of mine where I can kindle your visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. So I told you about some beautiful places, the landscapes I remember whenever I travel in a window seat on the train and look out on my 8-hour journey, totally glued to nature. And I also talking to you about the beautiful sound of the steam engines, and I was also talking to you about the various emotions that I kindled in you about how the water caresses my feet. And I was also talking about the rich smell of the fish curry that my granny used to prepare, the smell. And I of course took you on a voyage of how I actually tasted. So likewise you can, and this particular strategy is called as kindling your multi-sensory perceptions in your talk. This is the third strategy we are discussing. This strategy is called as providing sensory details to breathe life into your character. Now, let us look at a particular talk from Malcolm Gladwell. Of course, I gave you my narrative, but you are all going to give a TED talk. So, for every strategy, let's also look at examples from the TED. So, now let us look at this Malcolm Gladwell's talk. I have provided you the link here. By the end of today's class, I'll share this slide with you. So, let us see how Malcolm Gladwell brings sensory details in his talk. Now, can I have a volunteer to please read the transcript of Malcolm?
Yes, sir.
Gladwell?
So your voice is not clear.
Well, quite sorry. I think I've just lost my connectivity a little bit in between. But where was I? Uh, I mean, hello. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes. Now, can one of you remind me? I was talking to you about sensory details. Where did we lose our connectivity? Can you please take me back to that particular?
So after
Hello.
sensory details, you place a slide where someone's talking.
Yes, you are audible, Anna. You are audible. Yeah, yeah. I gave you an example of.
Yes, we left the point after.
Yeah, but did you hear the example which I gave you how to kindle the different senses? Was that clear to you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. After that
Okay.
only, sir. Like you
After
asked
that.
this volunteer to read.
Okay, okay. So I'm just going to show you a TED talk, and we are going to see how the speaker kindles those multisensory perceptions. So that is what we are just going to see. So could you please read, Fahima?
Yes, sir. So I
Yeah,
can't see the material, sir. Can you?
yeah. Just a moment.
You're not sharing the screen now.
I think, yeah. So I think once I just lost the connectivity, I think once again I have to share. I'm very sorry. I'm just sharing it now. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Howard's about this high and is round and is in his 60s. He has big, huge glasses and thinning grey hair. And he has a kind of wonderful exuberance and vitality. He has a parrot and he loves the opera. And he's a great aficionado of medieval history. By profession, he's a psychophysicist. Malcolm
Wonderful.
Gladwell said. He
Wonderful.
brings the
Please listen.
character to life.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Jeffrey. See, you can just introduce the character, uh, but when he's giving a narration about the person, look at the minute details. Doesn't he bring the person to your imagination? You could simply say that he can just talk about the particular person, but there is a lot of minute detailing here. Howard's about this high, and he is round. He is in his 60s. He has those huge glasses and thinning gray hair, and he has a wonderful exuberance and vitality. He has a parrot and he loves the opera, and he is a great aficionado of medieval history. By profession, he is a psychophysicist. This is one way of explaining. Another way of explaining is Howard is a psychophysicist who is in his 60s. He has huge glasses and is very tall. No, there is no minute detailing here. But when you are talking about a character, you have to use words and bring that particular person in front of someone. So this is called as sensory detailing. Now, this is one principle I'm just going to highlight. You can do this in speech. Okay. This is called as, this particular aspect in a speech is called as follow the principle of show instead of telling. For example, you can create a mental image where you where you show things to people. It is not that you have to show a picture, but you can help people to visualize. So that is one strategy, multisensory perceptions. Shall we move on to the next strategy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, another example. Okay. Let us look at this example of Mike Rowe. Now, in his speech titled Learning from Dirty Jobs, there's a particular talk. If you Google it, the name of the talk is Learning from Dirty Jobs. Now, he recounts an experience his own experience. What is that experience? That experience was he sees a particular person taking a sheep and castrating it. What is the meaning of castration? Any idea what's the meaning of castration? Have you heard about this word castration?
No, sir.
Yeah, castration is, there is a particular a folklore, a particular custom that is followed in villages, where whenever they look at this oxen, cow and this ox, they're very wild, they're very difficult to control, but they need to use the oxen for a lot of field work. But the oxen gets very much attracted towards the cow and it just gets wild. So what they'll do with the oxen is they'll take the ox and they will crush its testis. It's a very painful process for the animal. Humans usually exploit animal for their needs. It's such a terrible thing to do for animals. They just crush its reproductive organs. So and after that it becomes 1 or 10 days it just recovers. After it recovers, after its testes are crushed, then they use it for their field work or whatever. So here in this particular speech, we come across a person describing the process of castration. Now, what I described is something which does not have visual senses in that, but you come across a TED speaker who talks about castrating a sheep. And I want one volunteer to read that so that this message of appealing to all 5 senses, classic example from this TED talk. So may I request, one more volunteer to please read this. It's a little longer passage, but I request one of you to read.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please.
In the space of about 2 seconds, Albert had the knife between the cartilage of the tail, right next to the butt of the lamp, and very quickly the tail was on and in the bucket that I was holding. A second later, with a big thumb and a well-calloused forefinger, he had the scrotum firmly in his grasp, and he pulled it toward him, like so, and he took the knife and he put it on the tip. Now you think you know what's coming. Michael, you don't, okay? He snips it, throws the tip over the shoulder, and then grabs his scrotum and pushes it upward. And then his head dips down, obscuring my view. But what I hear is a slurping sound and a noise that sounds like Velcro being yanked off the sticky wall.
This is really, if you had listened, I'm sure that this certainly it's very painful to hear, because it brings those emotions on how something is being castrated. And look at the final line, and when it cut off, it is like the sound of a Velcro being yanked off a sticky wall. How you stick a Velcro, like how he just gives a build up on how the lamb is panicking, how it's the tail is pushed into the bucket, how he is holding the scrotum, and the kind of smells, and how he prepares himself to cut it down, and the sound of the cutting and the noise of that animal, everything is just picturized here. I would not call it as so profoundly described, but it is so painful. So whenever you describe certain things or bring in some emotions, the words you use when you try to kindle all these emotions of visual, auditory, sensory, olfactory, and the touch, kinesthetic, when you try to purposefully trigger these emotions, your talk will be a talk that will always be remembered. These are very much remembered TED Talks with a lot of hits, and because these talks have these storytelling elements. So that is why my lecture is coined as storytelling strategies. So we discussed about how you can provide. I'm not saying that in your 8-minute TED Talk you should all apply all these strategies, but if you apply any 2 or 3 of these storytelling strategies, I'm sure that your talk will be profound. And similarly, when it goes to applying these multisensory perceptions, You need not apply all, at least 2 or 3. Okay. So thank you.
Sir, we can't hear you now, sir.
Very sorry, ma'am. My network has never been so unstable, but today it's quite unstable. We are back.
It's okay, sir.
Okay, what are we discussing now? We are discussing about specific detailing. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So, in terms of specific detailing, okay, one of you please read my Ashmita. Can you? Ashmita? Yashmita, okay. I'm sorry. All right. Okay. Who else? Can you read Balachandar? Balachandar is also
Yes,
here.
sir.
Balachandar?
Yes.
Yeah, please, Balachandar. Yes.
But on morning, December 10, 1986, work up to discover that I had brain disorder of my own. Do you notice how much more more powerful that is than saying? But one morning, a couple of years ago, I woke up to discover I had a brain disorder of my own. Also, doesn't giving the specific date, December 10, 1986, in a sound more believable than satisfying a couple of days ago.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the effort, Balachandar. See, look at these verses. A particular speaker talks about a brain disorder that happened to her on a particular day. But look at her detailing. So it's so powerful. There are two ways of saying it. One way of saying it is, one morning a couple of years ago, I woke up to discover I had a brain disorder on my own. So it doesn't have a specific date and it doesn't look so specific. So probably if she is using a particular year, or if she's saying that it happened on December 10, 1996, when I look at the first sentence, but on the morning of December 10, 1996, I woke up to discover that I had a brain disorder of my own. This is specific language. But unspecific language, but one morning a couple of years ago, I woke up to discover I had brain disorder. So that is the difference between specific language and unspecific language. Now, one important point, strategy 3 for today's class is the power of saying positive stories. I mean, sometimes it's like watching a movie. You watch a movie, you may have different kinds of narrations. Some movies, when you watch, when you leave, it does not leave you on a high, it leaves you on a low. You develop a kind of a pessimistic view of your life. But some movies, if you watch, it really, so much inspires you. Do you agree with me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So should be, yes, thank you for the responses. So should be your presentations. When you finish your presentation should leave people on a high, because sometimes there is no harm in sharing these kind of stories. For example, the story of how a sheep was castrated, it didn't leave me on a high. Probably it could be one of the talks which is watched a few thousand times, but actually it did not leave me on a high. So always share stories that are very positive. Positive messages are inspiring. So whenever you talk, you should leave your audience on an emotional high and not on an emotional low. So pick stories like that from your life. And most importantly, use dialogue and not narration. For example, in my talk, if I can share a particular dialogue that happened to me and my granny in my village, when I am giving personal narration, that will be more powerful than me describing the entire episode. So that is called as the power of positive stories. Strategy 4. Okay, this is called as the spark, the change, and the takeaway. Let us see how many of you are applying this strategy. The spark, the change, the takeaway. 99.9% of the TED Talks follow this principle. Okay, the spark, the change, and the takeaway. What is spark? I was a normal human being leading a very normal life, but on that particular day, something happened in my life. I was on my deathbed. That is the spark. Okay, and then the person goes on to narrate what kind of changes that he encountered, and that is called the change. The takeaway is the message. What is the message I learned, and what is the message my audience can take away from my talk? This strategy is used by almost 99.9% of TED speakers. It is called as the spark, the change, and the takeaway. Okay, so as I just listened, do you remember in the last week I gave you an example of domestic violence that happened to a character called Lizzie, how she was actually beaten brutally by her husband, and yet Lizzie went to went on to marry that man. But if you listen to the full talk, a time came in her life where she doesn't want to take the domestic violence anymore. What was the incident that happened in her life? That was the spark. And she made a decision not to be cowed down or not to be covered, but to be very courageous and diversive. That is called the change. And what is the takeaway for all women who face domestic violence? Please listen to the talk. I have given you the link. And this strategy is called as the spark, the change, and the takeaway. So I have used, say, about 6 or 7 powerful storytelling strategies right from my earlier classes, starting with the power of personal narration, having a conflict element in your stories, using the power of imagery to appeal to all the emotions, and then to use really positive stories, and then using the strategy of the spark, the change, and the takeaway. You can use any one of these strategies in your talk. So your talk can be any of these strategies. You can be a hero's journey, like what is your journey in life. You can share your journey. That is one kind of storytelling. And another kind of storytelling is an emotional storytelling. For instance, some of you may have been afflicted by COVID. What kind of emotional changes took place in your mind? What are the learning lessons? So that is an emotional storytelling. Suspense storytelling. Suspense storytelling is followed by this character Leslie, who actually we don't know what happened in her life after marriage. Did she divorce or did she not divorce? Did her husband beat her every day? What happened to that? So she was slowly building suspense in her talk. That is called suspense storytelling. Another strategy of storytelling is called as data driven storytelling. You can bring a lot of data into a PowerPoint and you can narrate into kind of story. And then audience centered storytelling, always analyzing what the audience wants. Probably when you talk about stress in adolescence, and if you're talking to adolescents, it is an audience centered topic where you can take them on a metaphorical journey. That is called audience centered storytelling. And then moral values, if you want to talk about a value based storytelling, something that happens among religious sermons. If you happen to give a religious sermon in your church or in your in your mosque or in your temple to a group of people where you want to change them by giving some anecdotes from your the Bible or the Quran or the Gita, they are just value based storytelling. And the tragic storytelling, where you want to make the audience cry, so that is called tragic. And the last kind of storytelling is philanthropic storytelling, where you are talking about social service and you want to pull people to do that, what you are doing. That is called philanthropic storytelling. So actually, I have come to an end of my, talk. I know, but the previous two classes, I didn't have much interaction with you, but in the remaining classes, I will have a lot of interaction. But because it was a lecture series on storytelling, I have given you some strategies of telling your story powerfully. Now, let me stop this recording and have some casual discussions with you to help you to do this assignment task better, because it actually boils down to doing what we discuss.